A crucial meeting to vote on the governance reform of West Indies cricket fell flat 2 Fridays ago. The Guyana Cricket Board and Barbados Cricket Association were a no-show. They claim that their concerns about governance reform have not been addressed, nor was it even considered by the board of directors. This week, we sit down with Cricket West Indies President Dr Kishore Shallow to address their concerns, but also to look as a new year beckons in West Indies cricket with the same old governance structure. Cricket West Indies President Dr Kishore Shallow, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ryan. Pleasure being here as usual.
Mr. President, over the last week, the Barbados Cricket Association and the Guyana Cricket Board failed to show up at a critical governance reform vote and special general meeting of Cricket West Indies. Did you anticipate that might happen?
Well, not really. I was having gone through the process. This was a matter obviously ventilated for a couple of years now, to be honest. We have gone through different phases to get to this stage, consultations with the shareholders, with stakeholders, the broader stakeholders, including the shareholders. The governance committee as well looked at this, placed these recommendations before the board. The board approved them. And to have directors on the board, presidents, who are part of the territorial board, the shareholders, one would imagine that you'll get the support there automatically. However, just probably less than 24 hours before the meeting, we were informed that by GCB that they are retracting from the names they submitted, meaning that they were not going to attend. And then we had similar indication from Barbados, but they never confirmed their position. So we were still hopeful up until the commencement of that meeting, 10 a.m. the morning, that Barbados reps were going to show up. Unfortunately, they did not. And we are where we are now.
Have you had conversations with the directors from the BCA and the GCB in the last week?
No, I haven't spoken to the director since. I sent a formal letter to the GCB president and CWI director. Just really a last plea, I would say, soliciting his cooperation with not just this matter, but Cricket West Indies. I just believe that there could be greater consideration, the agenda and the interests of West Indies cricket. The agenda should be aligned with the interests of West Indies cricket. I think there's some great areas and some improvement that could take place there. And so I sent a letter, soliciting his support and cooperation, and for him to really look at and act in the best interest of West Indies cricket.
The Barbados Cricket Association and the Guyana Cricket Board say they had previously tabled a counter proposal to have a rotational presidency and vice presidency of Cricket West Indies. They claim that was never considered by Cricket West Indies, the board of directors, that is. Why wasn't it considered, and was it not discussed in order to, and I say that not because it should be voted on or considered at least, but merely because they are two full member directors and they have concerns and they have suggestions. They claim that that no response was forthcoming after proposing it.
Right. So, Ryan, it's a misrepresentation of the facts, right? It is incorrect, right? Inaccurate. If you want to you could put that anyhow. So let me tell you what transpired was, as you're aware, the Webby report, is a document, is a report of recommendations that it derived from consultations across the region, right? Different stakeholders in cricket. Now, the rotational presidency of vice president, it was not included in the Webby's report, all right? However, you had two particular individuals who believe that the rotational policy should be considered, right? the agenda behind this is unknown, right? One can speculate, but it has not been ventilated. Even with the rotation, how will it work? You know, how is meant to be implemented and work and executed? It is just the details are not there. However, we actually asked our governance committee to consider it, to consider this rotational policy put forward by one of the gentlemen actually is on that governance committee, right? And they discussed it at the governance committee. The governance committee suggested and concluded then that it was not practical at this point, right? That report came to the board, right? Came to the board when we discussed the other recommendations from the Webby report, right? So it was not passed. I didn't find favor with the governance committee. It did not find favor with the board, and therefore it will not be implemented. It is just not properly thought out, right? How long, what is the term going to be? Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years you're going to rotate? How are you going to identify the leaders?
So Dr. Shallow, I get that you're saying that the board of directors and the governance committee, it did not find favor with them, but they argue, the BCA and the GCB argue that it was not given due consideration, and in fact, there was no reply. So you are telling the people of the Caribbean that it actually was considered by the governance committee, that the board of directors was aware of this, and they just did not favor it, so it did not move further.
And this is minuted. This is in so the president of GCB sits on the cricket board, Cricket West Indies board. The president of BCA sits on the Cricket West Indies board, and there are the directors as well. So of course it has been considered, but it did not find favor with the governance committee or the board of directors of Cricket West Indies.
The BCA and GCB also say the proposed changes and amendments lack clarity in the form as presented. How would you respond to that?
I mean, I can't help if they can't interpret basic, resolutions, right? That is a matter for the members. But I find it very strange that a significant majority of the directors comprehend these resolutions, but yet these two boards, in fact, they're absolutely no secret, right? Resolution to introduce term limit. I mean, that is crystal clear. The other one is to extend from 2 to 3 years. That is clear, right? And there are a couple more with the amendments to the Constitution, which is necessary, right? So it is not a matter of they're not clear on it. I think it's just a matter of, they have to justify their position, Ryan. And that is what we are seeing at this point. But remember, we have gone through this process for at least 3 years since Ricky Skerritt was the president. We have gone through this. The shareholders asked for more consultations. We did that. We had meetings after meetings. We had shareholders meetings. We had board meetings dedicated just for this agenda of governance reform. So the board, I mean, it would be strange that with all those opportunities to seek clarification on these resolutions, that they did not. But yet they decided to take the position. So, I mean, most persons would be able to conclude what is happening here.
Coming up after the break, after years of discussions on governance reform, it falls flat. But who's to blame? In between March and December, do you feel that you should have done more lobbying? I want to ask a little bit about the other elements that would have been considered and perhaps voted upon 2 Fridays ago, Mr. President. Of course, you and the board showed up at that meeting to vote on the presidential term limits. What other parts of the Webby report would have been under consideration for governance reform at that meeting?
Yeah, so there would have been others before, and I just, the third one is slipping me. There were 4 resolutions being put forward. I know regarding term limit and the expansion of the term. The other would have been, because once you pass those, then you have to have another resolution to amend the constitution. So that would have been the fourth one, which is generally straightforward. The third one is slipping me now, sorry. But
yeah, that's fine. I completely understand. But I do want to add some other concerns that both the BC and GCB have come out with in the last week. One of those concerns is that they feel that some of these amendments to governance reform in West Indies cricket will take power, this is their words, not mine, take power away from the territorial boards. Is that concern a valid one? And should territorial boards have less and less power in the governance of West Indies cricket? From your experience as both a vice president and president of Cricket West Indies?
No, absolutely not. How does it take away any power? If you're introducing term limits, I mean, you're actually relinquishing power, right? I'll just tell you the third resolution, Ryan, was to have a more clarity around the nomination period, right? So if you recall, just a few months ago, there was the matter between GCB and Cricket West Indies that went through the court. And it obviously, the premise of it was the fact that GCB withdrew their nomination for the vice president in the last election in 2023. Now, we believe that we observe an opportunity to strengthen the constitution so that everyone is explicitly clear. The issue was the constitution, right, stayed silent on that matter, right? So this resolution was to explicitly state the number of days when the nomination has to be submitted, right? And the actions that could be taken thereafter, right? Once a nomination period ends. And so those were the three, right? The term limit for the presidency, right? And vice presidency, those offices. The second one was to expand from 2 to 3 years. And the third one was to be explicitly clear with the nomination period. And then the fourth was obviously to amend so that we could incorporate those three in our articles of association. So now the irony in this, right? And go back to your question about reducing the power of the board. Now, I don't know which one of those reduced the power of the board, right? I can't figure which one, and maybe you should interview the GCB and the BC at some point. All right. But the point is, if one of the arguments for the rotational policy is to minimize the politics, the campaigning and so on, you would think that naturally someone would gravitate towards expanding the term for the presidency. It means that you don't have to now have a campaign every other year in Cricket West Indies. We have had support for this from politicians and others across the Caribbean, right? Distinguished executives from across Caribbean, and obviously from the Webby's report, right? But that didn't find favor either. So I would probably reserve or try to avoid answering on behalf of GCB and BC because it's really complex.
In the aftermath, and it was a very quick aftermath of that special meeting that did not take place because of a lack of quorum last week, Friday. A Cricket West Indies statement immediately after said, Mr. President, CWI remains committed to the governance reform process and will explore all options to ensure the necessary steps are taken to implement the Webby report recommendations. What could those other options look like?
Well, the corporate secretary, our internal counsel, she has suggested that it could be done electronically. It could be sent, the resolutions could be sent to the board, and they have indeed been sent to the boards for participation and voting on those resolutions. So that is also an alternative. it's obviously preferable to have the shareholders, together where you could discuss each matter. But then the boards could also submit their sentiments or their opinions on the resolutions electronically. But I would say that by and large, there's a shared commitment from the territorial boards to support the governance reform, including these 4 resolutions that were put to the board. And I suspect strongly that it is for that reason why BCA and GCB believe that they have found themselves in the minority, why they did not attend that meeting.
Mr. President, do you feel then that you should have, and perhaps your vice president, you and or your vice president should have spent more time lobbying those who would have been perhaps against the reformation of governance for West Indies cricket over the last few months? There was a meeting in March, I believe, in between March and December. Do you feel that you should have done more lobbying? Do you feel that your vice president should have had more conversations with both the BCA and the GCB so that when you guys get to the negotiating table, to the special meeting last Friday, that you would not have ended up in this position?
I mean, one could always say that you could try more, but again, we have been discussing this matter of governance for years, right? An attempt as well was to get the CARICOM heads speak to the territorial leaders as well, the presidents, so that they could get an appreciation from the CARICOM leaders of how critical it is to have governance reform. And Ryan, remember that this is a matter, these resolutions were approved at the CWI board level, right? The CWI board comprises of presidents and other reps from the territorial board. So in order for it to get to the stage of going to the shareholders, it would have passed the reps from these territorial boards, right? It is more of a case of, and remember, up until 24 hours, those members had indicated, in fact, they had confirmed, right? Certainly in GCB's case, the reps who were going to attend the meeting, we had names of the shareholder reps who were attending the meeting. So there was no concern, right, about them not participating in that meeting last week. Right. And I'm extremely disappointed, quite frankly, in the manner in which the territorial boards, those 2 territorial boards went about it. Up to this point, we haven't had a formal correspondence from BCA about their absence, right? Unless it was sent sometime recently, and it hasn't been communicated to me just yet. And as I said, it was within 24 hours of that meeting. So they had ample time even before to express that they are not supporting or they're not going to attend the meeting and so on. And we would have postponed the meeting and make further attempts to ascertain from them what are the real challenges they have with the resolutions.
Coming up after the break, the big question for Dr. Kishore Shallow. Will you consider running again for president next year? I want to bring in CARICOM into the conversation. You mentioned, quite rightly, that politicians around the Caribbean have been advocating for governance reform of West Indies cricket. There was an entire symposium on West Indies cricket last year. This is something that there is a subcommittee on CARICOM to focus on when it comes to West Indies cricket. Have you been in touch with CARICOM, particularly the subcommittee, in the aftermath of what transpired last Friday? And what do you imagine will be the response of CARICOM in such after what we witnessed in the aftermath of that meeting that didn't happen?
We had a meeting, a fruitful meeting with the CARICOM Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Cricket I think is on the 24th of November, give and take a day, but thereabout. That meeting was held in Guyana. I think press releases went out from both Cricket West Indies and CARICOM, so you would have seen that. And again, in that forum, the leaders expressed their desire to support governance reform at Cricket West Indies. Obviously, it is a matter for Cricket West Indies to implement and finalize based on our articles and our structure. But they give their reasons. I would say that by and large, the territorial boards are in alignment. They are in alignment with the CARICOM leaders and governance reform. Maybe not at the pace at which they want. And what we agreed on is that this has to be an incremental approach, right? It cannot be a wholesale change overnight. So, we have incorporated some changes already, right, over the last few months. And the intention was to get over this phase as well with another set of implementations and changes. And then the intention is to go even further later on. What I believe is necessary, because BCA, Barbados Cricket Association, their Prime Minister has clearly stated her desire, right, for change. In fact, she has said implement the Webby's recommendation immediately, right? The President of Guyana has said the same thing, that he supports governance reform, right? But yet their national associations, right, is acting contrary to what their leaders are saying, right? It's the Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Mottley, and President of Guyana, Dr. Afan Ali, right? Clearly, they haven't been able to influence their national boards about this governance reform. And
Do you
they're
believe
saying
this will hurt, Mr. President? Do you believe this will hurt the working relationship between CARICOM and Cricket West Indies, given that there has to be a working relationship, given the structure of West Indies cricket and the uniqueness of West Indies cricket being different islands making up an international team? Do you believe that CARICOM leaders will look on at what happened or did not happen last week, Friday, and look at the board in a way, and look at you in a way that will put challenges in the work that you do and West Indies cricket does in the coming year?
I don't think so. I believe that, the leaders are very practical people, reasonable. They're because of their vested interest in West Indies cricket, they obviously observe our operations and our progress. And this is one situation where they would have clearly observed, efforts from the leadership of Cricket West Indies. And the very truth is that if you have 4 out of the 6 territorial boards agreeing to change, but then you have 2 who are refusing to attend meetings, right, which is where the changes are going to be effected. I believe it is a case of, maybe having a conversation with those individuals who are not attending the meeting. So I am sure Prime Minister Rowley, your Prime Minister, is not saying that the leadership of cricket failed to implement this, because he fully understands the situation. And what I would really appreciate is for President of Guyana, Prime Minister of Barbados, to have a discussion with the presidents of those 2 cricket associations, and hopefully we can get them on a page, on the wavelength of change, governance reform, right? And I think that would certainly help the situation.
Yeah, so you do believe that it is time for the politicians, particularly of these 2 nations, Barbados and Guyana, to get intimately involved in in what has been happening with this particular issue of governance reform.
I believe that would help the situation, because if the presidents and if the president of Guyana and the Prime Minister of Barbados are champions of change, governance reform, strengthening our governance structure, then I'm sure they would likely have a word with their people to get them to participate in this very important process.
Perhaps fracture is not the word, Mr. President, but certainly it seems as though your board is hamstrung at the moment, especially when it comes to critical issues such as governance reform. Let's not talk about minor issues that can make it past unanimous decisions. But when it comes to major decision making, like the one before us right now, would you agree with my statement that it seems that your board is hamstrung?
Nothing is wrong with having differences when it comes to changes. Certainly, it is not unusual, uncommon for organizations our boards like this to have disagreement. Our articles of association, allows for it. Allows for that, and that is why you have it stated how many representatives are necessary for quorum. Right, and they would say that they're exercising their rights, which in all fairness they are. So it is a matter of they hold a certain position when it comes to governance reform. We could say that greater efforts are needed. There are different agendas that people have why they're not supporting it, or why they are currently, suggesting, rotational policy and so on, and it could be one step at a time. If we want to continue, if there's interest in rotational presidency down the line, then fine. We could deal with that at another time. But currently what we have before us, there's 8 territories, well, 8 reps from the 4 territories, which are Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board, the Leeward Islands Cricket Board, Windward Islands Cricket Board, and the next one would be Jamaica Cricket Association, right? They have indicated that they're willing to support these changes. That is 8 out of 12. All right. And so I would say that despite the postponement of that meeting, I would still say that there is some progress, because previously, it didn't even reach to the board level, much as the shareholders level, where you have 8 out of the 12 supporting. So there's still some progress there. There's still progress that we have observed, and it's only a matter of time. I think it's inevitable that we are going to get these changes.
Yeah, so you say it's inevitable, but in the meantime, the structure of West Indies cricket remains the same as it pertains to governance. Mr. President, there is a due elections in 2025. You are president of Cricket West Indies. In the present structure, you are allowed to run again to become president once more. Will you consider running again for president next year?
It is certainly at the forefront of my thoughts, and currently I'm considering it. And once I have the support of the majority of the board, then, it's likely to happen. So it is a case of, but I am still optimistic that we will get these governance changes done by March next year, when our annual general meeting will be held, and when they will have the next set of elections. So again, I've seen some progress, and I think we'll definitely be able to get these resolutions over the line.
Cricket West Indies President, Dr. Kishore Shallow, thank you very much for your time. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Ryan. Take care.